What's up, core reporters, and welcome to my channel. We've got to talk, like, seriously. First of all, before I even get into it, just know, and I'm saying it here right now, I think this podcast episode is going to get deleted. I think Vee might lawyer up, or she might get her husband to lawyer up, or to threaten Kail to take down this episode because it was vicious. Kail called Vee a user. She practically called her a bum-ass bee, and she also said that she was a deadbeat stepmom who was pretending to be a co-parent while they were running the Baby Mamas No Drama podcast, you guys. Like, it was nasty. And she kept on practically begging her listeners to go ahead and attack Vee as well. Let's go ahead, listen to the podcast episode, and let me take my vitamins in peace, y'all.
We have a very special guest today. I'm Barely Famous, and I'm very excited. You know her, you love her. She has hair extensions.
Not
you
anymore.
don't have hair extensions.
Not anymore. I took
Lindsie,
Lot's advice
and you cut your hair.
and I cut it off.
I love that. Well, you've never been on Barely Famous, so welcome to Barely Famous.
Can you believe that we've been podcasting since 2017?
No.
We both have secondary shows and have never, well, actually, you have a lot more shows than I do, but have never been on each other's other shows.
Because I think that the difference is that we have a show together, so we don't necessarily need to. But in this particular instance, I feel like we have reached the threshold where it is pretty necessary.
It is absolutely very necessary. I'm tired of getting DMs.
I'm also tired of getting comments and DMs.
I'm also tired of going on Facebook and seeing the things that I see on Facebook.
I think the problem is that when we are not fully transparent, people are left to their own devices to fill holes, to make assumptions, to come up with their own narrations. And obviously we know that there is a group of people that will, across the board, they believe what they want to believe, right? Like, we know that.
You could show receipts, come with straight facts, no lies, and they're still going to believe whatever it is that they feel like is the narrative.
100%. And I think that after we get through this month of episodes, like, I never want to talk about any of this ever again. Because, not because I don't want to talk about it, but it's like, I'm just like, it's tired. And it's like, I cannot spend any more time convincing people what is the truth. So I brought Lindsie on Barely Famous. We collectively decided that this was a good place to talk about this because, well, why?
I think because Barely Famous is or has become solo your life and the things that you deal with personally, whether that be in business or just in your personal life. I do the same thing on Southern Tea, and I think the dynamic is just very different on Coffee Convos, and right. I think it is a necessary outlet for you to do this.
I think we should tell everybody the beginning to the end of Baby Mama's No Drama from start to finish, from your perspective.
Okay, so we're going down memory lane, a lane that I don't like to travel. So we had Coffee Convos since 2017. Kail decided, actually, I really don't know the truth of what was decided for Baby Mamas, so I would love to hear that from your perspective. I know when it happened that I was completely blindsided by it, and I found out when the trailer dropped when everyone else found out about it.
So real quick, what do we find out first and foremost, right? If you guys recall, yesterday when we were listening to the Coffee Convos podcast, Lindsie was sharing a story about how Kail was really, really mean to her, and she truly berated her, and she was making these decisions about their business as a solo person as if she ran the entire show. And it was just a really, really rough listen to hear the way that Kail would speak to her behind the scenes. Then we learned that they would lawyer up, threaten to quit the podcast and stuff like that over the years. Now on Barely Famous, we find out that the only reason that Kail seemingly even went and agreed to do Baby Mama's No Drama with Vee was to get at Lindsie. She and Lindsie were not in a good place. They were business partners. Lindsie brought her into the podcasting world, and Kail repays her by going behind her back, launching a secondary podcast, and not even telling Lindsie. Lindsie finds out about it with the rest of the world. That is so freaking shady. That is so freaking grimy. Okay. Now keep that. But here's the gag. She thought she was going to stick it to Lindsie. This was probably at a time when they were lawyering up, threatening to quit that podcast. But she probably thought, okay, I'm going to let go of Coffee Convos right off into the sunset with Vee. And lo and behold, the same attitude that's getting her in trouble with Lindsie is the same attitude that gets her in trouble with Vee down the line and causes for that podcast to end. That is just crazy.
So Baby Mama started when I was sitting at my house in Middletown, which I only lived for a short time. I was sitting in my living room. Vee texted me and said, we should do a podcast talking about co-parenting and call it Baby Mama's No Drama. timeline of baby mamas and Vee texting me was 2019 into 2020. I don't know the exact timing on what that was. I made a personal decision that Kristen did not necessarily agree with to not tell you. And I think at that time, you and I were not, I'm not going to say we weren't getting along. We fight like sisters, and we always have. And I was concerned about your reaction at that time. And that's the honest to God truth, was that I did not know how you were going to react to it. So I felt like if I told you ahead of time, you would potentially talk me out of it. That's how I felt.
Okay.
And that's all I have to say.
And I mean, in fairness, I would have.
Try to talk me out of it?
Knowing what I know now, yes. But hindsight's always 20/20, right?
I also have that, I share that same perspective, like looking back and knowing what I know now, but also in such a full range of clear vision. And I've been saying that people are very, very upset by me saying that Vee and I were never friends and Vee and I were never co-parents. And I'm not saying that to be a dick. That is the truth. We don't co-parent and we were not friends. We never have been. We've been friendly. And I think at the time it was like, we're friendly, so we're friends, but they are not the same thing. And so looking back, we should have never started a co-parenting podcast, especially because I look back and I see you and I were talking about co-parenting on Coffee Convos.
Well, and I think that was the issue that I had. If you're going to do something else, make it different from what you're already doing. And it just very much felt to me like maybe possibly someone, I don't know who, saw success somewhere and was like, oh, we can duplicate and replicate that same thing. But why?
Well, here's the thing. I do agree that that is probably what happened. Vee saw that Kail was making bank doing her Coffee Convos podcast, and she wanted an opportunity to latch on to that in order to raise her own profile and to make money on her own, right? I think that's true. But at the same time, there's something that Lindsie is not catching on to. And that is the fact that Kail decided to go ahead and create a cheater brand behind her business partner's back because she and her business partner were not in a good place. And this was most likely one of those moments where they talked about in Coffee Convos this week, where they would be threatening lawyers on each other to quit the show, and stuff like that. So I see that Lindsie understands Vee's potential, like, ulterior motives, but it doesn't seem like she catches Kail's ulterior motives behind doing that. Or maybe she does, and she's just not voicing it, right? Because listen, when you see your frenemies or your enemies or whatever, someone, an adversary, I don't know, doing things and you know what they're up to, you're 2 steps ahead of them, you don't always have to tell them that you know what it is that they're doing. Sometimes you gotta just, like a little bit of, the little, what is it, the crocodiles or alligators? I don't know. But they have their like eyes like this. And, they're below the water. You don't even know that, they see you there. Boom, they eat you up and now you're dead. Something like that. You have to you got to keep some stuff for yourself and then make moves accordingly going forward. And I think that Lindsie does see what Kail was thinking in doing that. And she's just not saying it in order to kind of, have her own back and not let Kail know that she's on to her.